They will never betray their avoidance. That is the one thing they are loyal to above everything else, above you, above the relationship, above their own happiness. And the painful part is they do not even know they are doing it. You thought they were loyal to you. You thought the connection was real. You thought what you had mattered. And it did, but it will never matter more than their need to stay emotionally distant. That is the cold truth nobody tells you when you fall for an avoidant. And today we are going to go all the way through it, because once you understand this one core thing about how avoidants operate, everything about your relationship will finally start to make sense. The push and pull, the hot and cold, the moments of closeness followed by the wall going back up. All of it. It is going to click today. Before we go any further, I need you to do one thing. Drop a word in the comments right now, just one word that describes how loving an avoidant has made you feel. One word. Go do it right now and then come back, because what comes next is going to reframe everything you thought you knew about this person and about yourself. So let us start at the very beginning. Let us start with what avoidance actually is, because most people get this completely wrong. They think avoidance is a personality quirk. They think it is shyness. They think it is introversion. They think it is just someone who needs a lot of alone time. And sure, some of those things might also be true, but avoidant attachment is something much deeper and much more specific than any of those things. It is a survival strategy. That is what it is at its core. It is a coping mechanism that was built in childhood to protect a very young child from emotional pain. And here's the thing about survival strategies. They work. That is why people keep using them. When you are a child and the people who are supposed to love you are emotionally unavailable, or critical, or dismissive of your needs, or unpredictable in how they respond to your vulnerability, your nervous system does something very smart. It learns to stop reaching. It learns to pull back. It learns to self-soothe. It learns to say, I do not need anyone. And for that child, that strategy is genius. It protects them from the crushing disappointment of reaching for connection and getting nothing back, or worse, getting rejection or ridicule back. The child learns that their emotional needs are a burden, that needing people is dangerous, that closeness leads to pain. And so they build a wall, not consciously, not deliberately, just organically, the way children adapt to survive their environment. That child grows up, the wall does not come down, and now that child is your partner. And this is where it gets complicated, because that avoidant adult does want connection. That is the thing people miss. They do want love. They do want intimacy. They do feel lonely. They do feel the pull toward you. The attachment system in every human being wants closeness. That is wired into us biologically. We are social creatures. Avoidants are not aliens. They are humans with the same fundamental needs as everyone else. But their system has learned that closeness equals danger. So every time they start to feel it, every time the walls start to come down, every time real intimacy starts to happen, something triggers. Something in their nervous system says, danger, pull back, protect yourself. And they do, not because they do not care, not because you are not enough, but because their system is running a very old program that says closeness will hurt you. Distance is safety, and they are loyal to that program above everything else. That is the loyalty we are talking about. It is not a conscious choice. It is a deeply embedded pattern, a neurological groove that has been carved over years and years of protection. And it runs so deep that the avoidant themselves often cannot see it. They do not wake up in the morning and think, let me keep this person at arm's length today. They do not think, I am going to withdraw right when things get close. It just happens. It feels natural to them. It feels like breathing. Distance feels like oxygen. And closeness starts to feel like suffocation, even when they love you, even when they genuinely, truly love you. Now let us talk about what this looks like in real life. Because understanding something intellectually is one thing, but being on the receiving end of it is something entirely different. And if you have loved an avoidant, you know exactly what I am about to describe. You know the feeling of things going really well, and then something shifts. You cannot always point to what caused it. Maybe you had a great weekend together. Maybe you said something that felt vulnerable. Maybe the two of you got closer than usual. And then they pull back, they get quiet, they get busy, they create distance in ways that feel subtle but land with full force. The texts get shorter, the calls get less frequent. They seem fine, just not as present, not as warm. And you start doing the calculation in your head. What did I do? Did I say something wrong? Did I push too hard? Was I too much? Was I not enough? And you start adjusting yourself, trying to figure out the right formula to bring them back to that warm version of themselves that you know exists because you have seen it, you have felt it, you know it is in there. Please stop for a second. I asked you at the start of the video to leave a comment. If you already did, thank you. If not, take 2 seconds and do it now. It really helps this video reach more people. This is the cycle, and it is exhausting. It is genuinely one of the most exhausting relational dynamics that exists because the goalpost keeps moving and the rules are never quite clear. And just when you think you have figured it out, just when things feel stable again, the cycle starts over. And you tell yourself this time will be different. This time we have talked about it. This time they understand what I need. This time something has changed. But the avoidance is still there because the avoidance is not about the argument you had or the thing you said or the way you asked for something. The avoidance is structural. It is foundational. It is the entire architecture of how that person relates to the world. And until that changes from the inside, nothing you do on the outside will fix it. Let me say that again because I want it to land. Nothing you do on the outside will fix something that lives this deep on the inside. You cannot love someone out of avoidant attachment. You cannot be patient enough, consistent enough, understanding enough, or available enough to dismantle a defense system that has been in place since childhood. That is not your job. That has never been your job. And the fact that you have been trying to do it, the fact that you have been twisting yourself into knots, trying to be the perfect amount of close without being too close, trying to need things without needing too much, trying to be vulnerable without making them feel trapped. That says everything about your attachment style and nothing about your worth, because anxious and avoidant partners often find each other. They are drawn to each other like magnets. And it makes sense when you understand the dynamics. The anxious partner pursues, the avoidant withdraws, the anxious partner pursues harder, the avoidant withdraws further, and both of them stay stuck in a dance that confirms their deepest fears. The anxious partners fear that they are too much, that they will be abandoned, that love is not safe. And the avoidant partners fear that closeness will consume them, that they will lose themselves, that needing someone makes them weak. And here is the cruel irony at the center of all of this. The more you love an avoidant, the more they feel it, the more likely they are to pull away. Because real love creates real intimacy. And real intimacy feels like real danger to their system. So your love, the thing you are offering as a gift, often triggers their deepest fear response. It is not fair. It is genuinely not fair, but it is real. And understanding it does not make it hurt less in the moment, but it does help you stop blaming yourself for something you never had the power to control. Now, I want to talk about the specific ways avoidants demonstrate this loyalty to their avoidance, because it shows up in patterns that are very recognizable once you know what to look for. The first one is the intimacy ceiling. Every avoidant has one. There is a level of closeness they can tolerate, and then there is a ceiling, and you will hit it. No matter how good things are, no matter how much they care about you, there is a point beyond which they cannot go without triggering that fear response. And when you hit it, they will find a way to create distance. Sometimes it is overt, a fight that comes out of nowhere. A sudden need to have more space, a change in plans, a pulling back that is obvious and noticeable, but sometimes it is covert. A subtle emotional withdrawal, a shift in energy that you can feel but cannot quite name. A way of being present in the room but not really being there. Both versions are forms of the same thing. They have hit their ceiling, and they are creating distance to regulate themselves. The second pattern is the devaluation cycle. This one is particularly painful. When an avoidant starts to feel too close, one of the ways their system protects them is by finding fault. Suddenly, things about you that were fine before become irritating. Suddenly, they are noticing your flaws in a way that feels different. Suddenly, there is a critical energy that was not there before. And if you are on the receiving end of this, you will feel it. It will feel like a shift in how they see you. And in a way it is, but not because you have changed or because you have done something wrong. Their system is creating emotional distance by manufacturing reasons to be less connected to you. It is a protection mechanism. If I can find enough wrong with this person, then I do not have to be as attached to them. I do not have to be as vulnerable. I do not have to risk as much. It is unconscious, but it is real and it is genuinely damaging if you are the one being subjected to it. The third pattern is the fantasy. Avoidants are often more comfortable with the idea of a relationship than the reality of one. They can romanticize connection from a distance. They can long for intimacy when they do not have it. They can be incredibly loving in the early stages of a relationship when things are still somewhat abstract and the vulnerability is not yet fully required. But as things get real, as the day-to-day texture of actual partnership comes into play, as the need to show up consistently and be emotionally available becomes more concrete, the discomfort grows. And they often look back on relationships that ended as better than they were. Or they look forward to some imagined version of partnership that is always slightly out of reach. The fantasy is always safer than the reality because the fantasy does not require them to actually be vulnerable. The fourth pattern is the rubber band dynamic, and this one creates so much confusion and hope. An avoidant pulls away. You feel the distance. Maybe you start to pull back yourself, or maybe the distance naturally creates a drop in intensity. And then they come back. They reach back out. They are warm and engaged, and it feels like the connection has returned. And you think, okay, that phase is over. We are back. We are good. But what has actually happened is that the distance reduced their anxiety enough that they could come back towards you. The closeness then starts to build again, and the cycle begins again. They are not coming back because they have resolved something or grown through something. They are coming back because the distance made it feel safe enough to come close again, until it does not. And then the rubber band stretches back out, over and over and over again. And if you do not understand this pattern, you will spend enormous amounts of emotional energy in the euphoria of the reconnection without realizing that the reconnection itself is planting the seeds of the next withdrawal. The fifth pattern is the avoidance of repair. When avoidants hurt someone they love, when there has been a rupture in the relationship, the healthy path forward is repair, acknowledging what happened, taking responsibility, being emotionally present with the person you hurt, sitting with their pain, allowing yourself to be impacted by it. But for avoidance, repair is incredibly threatening because repair requires vulnerability. It requires staying present when things are emotionally intense. It requires tolerating discomfort without fleeing. So what you often see instead is a kind of surface-level repair, an apology that feels rehearsed or generic, a move to fix the practical problem without addressing the emotional wound, or even just a pivot back to normal without really addressing what happened at all, as if by moving forward quickly enough, they can skip over the part where they have to be truly emotionally present with your pain. And the problem is that when repair does not really happen, the ruptures accumulate. They do not disappear just because they are not talked about. They build up, they create distance, they erode trust, and over time the relationship feels less and less safe for the person on the receiving end of all these unrepaired moments. I want to pause here for a second because I need to be clear about something important. None of this means avoidants are bad people. This is not about labeling or demonizing anyone. The patterns I am describing are the result of real pain, real developmental wounds, real experiences that shaped a nervous system to protect itself in specific ways. Avoidants often suffer deeply in their relationships. They often feel a profound longing for the intimacy they simultaneously push away. They often feel shame about their inability to be closer. They often love the people in their lives very genuinely and feel confused and distressed about why they keep creating distance. Understanding avoidant attachment is not about writing someone off. It is about seeing clearly. It is about having accurate information so that you can make real choices about your own life instead of operating on confusion and hope and the belief that if you just do the right thing, the dynamic will change. And speaking of change, let us talk about that because this is where things get really nuanced. Can avoidance change? The honest answer is yes. Attachment patterns are not destiny. They are deeply ingrained, but they are not permanent. The brain retains plasticity. Patterns formed in childhood can be examined, understood, and gradually rewired. It is possible for someone with avoidant attachment to do the work, to go into therapy, to start understanding their triggers, to practice tolerating the discomfort of closeness, to learn to stay present when every part of them wants to flee, to build a different relationship with vulnerability. It is possible. It happens. People do it. But it requires the avoidant themselves to recognize that there is a problem and to want to change it. And this is the crucial part. That recognition and that desire have to come from inside the avoidant. You cannot plant them there from outside no matter how hard you try. You cannot want someone's growth more than they want it for themselves and expect that to lead anywhere good. If the avoidant in your life has not yet come to a place of genuinely wanting to understand and shift their patterns, then your love and your patience and your understanding, as generous and real as those things are, will not be enough to create that change. Because the loyalty to the avoidance is stronger than the pull toward growth as long as the avoidance still feels like safety. This brings me to something that I think is one of the most important points in this entire conversation. The question of what you do with this information. Because understanding all of this is one thing, but applying it to your actual life, to the actual relationship you are in or trying to recover from, that is where it gets personal and hard and where people often get stuck. So let me speak directly to you for a moment. If you are currently in a relationship with someone who has avoidant attachment patterns, the first thing I want you to do is stop trying to diagnose them and start turning the lens toward yourself. What is this relationship doing to you? Not in a blaming way. Just honestly, are you more anxious than you used to be? Are you second-guessing yourself more? Are you shrinking? Are you performing a version of yourself that is calibrated to not trigger their withdrawal rather than a version that is genuinely you? Are you happy? Not are you happy sometimes. Not are there good moments. But on balance, in your daily lived experience, does this relationship feel good? Does it feel nourishing? Does it feel safe? Those are the questions that matter. Not whether you can understand them well enough to fix them. Not whether your love is strong enough. Not whether you just need to be more patient. You, your experience, your life. What is this actually doing to you? Because here is what happens to people who love avoidance for too long without that kind of honest self-reflection. They start to change, and not in good ways. The chronic unpredictability creates hypervigilance. You become attuned to every tiny shift in their mood, every change in tone, every slight variation in response time. Because you have learned that these are clues about whether the walls are going up or coming down. And that level of attunement is exhausting. It is like living with your nervous system permanently on high alert. Over time, you start to doubt your own perceptions, because avoidants often do not acknowledge the distance they are creating. They often say things are fine when everything in your gut is telling you they are not. And when you bring it up, you are told you are overthinking it, or you are too sensitive, or nothing is wrong. And eventually you start to wonder if you are the one who is broken, if you are the one who has the problem, if you are the one who is too much. And that self-doubt, that erosion of trust in your own perceptions, that is one of the most damaging long-term effects of loving an avoidant without having a clear understanding of what is actually happening. Let me also talk about something that does not get discussed enough, and that is the grief of loving an avoidant, because there is a particular kind of grief that comes with this dynamic. It is not the clean grief of a relationship that ended. It is the ambiguous grief of a relationship that is still going but keeps falling short. The grief of the connection you almost have. The grief of the person they almost are with you. The grief of the relationship that is almost everything you want but keeps disappearing right when it feels real. That kind of grief is particularly hard to process because it is ongoing. There is no clear moment of loss to grieve. The loss keeps happening in small increments, and each one feels confusing because it is mixed with the hope of the next reconnection. And so the grief never really gets to complete itself. It just sits there, accumulating quietly, while you keep hoping this time will be different. If this is resonating with you, I want you to take a moment with that. Really sit with it. Because the thing about that grief is that it deserves to be acknowledged. It deserves to be felt, not bypassed, not intellectualized, not turned into a project of trying to understand them better so you can fix it. Just felt. The sadness of wanting something real and not being able to fully have it. The loneliness of being in a relationship and still feeling alone the exhaustion of loving someone who keeps choosing distance. That is real loss, and you are allowed to feel it even if the relationship is still technically intact. Now, I want to talk about something that I think is genuinely hopeful, and that is what happens when you shift your focus from them to you, because that is where real change lives. Not in whether they will ever become capable of the closeness you need, not in whether you can figure out the right formula, but in who you are and what you need and what you will and will not accept and how you want to feel in your relationships. Because when you start to get really clear on those things, something interesting happens. You stop being available for the crumbs. You stop settling for almost. You stop negotiating your own needs down to nothing in hopes of not triggering their withdrawal. You start to have a relationship with your own emotional reality that is more important than managing theirs. And from that place, you can make clear decisions. You can decide to stay and set clear boundaries and see if they are willing to do the work. You can decide to leave and actually leave instead of leaving and coming back. You can decide what you need from a relationship and hold that standard even when holding it feels scary. Let me tell you what actually changes things for people who have been caught in this pattern. It is not more understanding. It is not more patience. It is developing your own secure base. It is building a relationship with yourself that is so solid that you do not need the avoidance warmth to feel okay, where their distance no longer sends you into a spiral, where their coldness does not become evidence that you are unworthy, where your sense of yourself is not contingent on their approval or their availability. And the interesting thing is that when you do that work, when you build that kind of internal security, one of two things tends to happen. Either the avoidant in your life actually starts to step up because your anxious pursuit was part of what was triggering their withdrawal, and when you stop pursuing, they have room to actually come forward. Or you become clear enough in yourself to see the situation for what it is and to make a choice about whether it is actually what you want. Either way, you win. Either way, you are in a different position. And that position starts with you, not with them. There is something I want to say about the people who are reading this or listening to this who are avoidants themselves, because some of you are, and I think you deserve to be spoken to directly too. I know this is not easy to hear. I know that seeing your patterns described from the outside can feel exposing or even unfair, because from the inside, your withdrawal does not feel like a choice. It feels like breathing. It feels necessary. It feels like the only way to stay safe. And I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that your walls were not built arbitrarily. They were built because you needed them. Because at some point in your life, staying distant was how you survived. And that is real. That matters. But I also want to ask you something gently. Is that protection actually protecting you anymore? Or is it costing you things you actually want? The intimacy, the real connection, the kind of love that stays. Because the same walls that kept you safe as a child might be the walls that are keeping out the very things you long for as an adult. And that is worth sitting with. Not to blame yourself, not to make yourself wrong, but to consider whether the time might be coming to look at those walls honestly, to get some support in understanding them, to start slowly and carefully to see whether there is another way to feel safe that does not require staying so far from the people who love you. Because here is the other side of all of this. The potential for avoidance who do the work is real. The capacity for earned security is real. The ability to gradually build a different relationship with closeness and vulnerability and being truly known is absolutely real. People do it. It is slow. It is uncomfortable. It requires sitting with feelings that have been avoided for a very long time. It requires developing a tolerance for the discomfort of intimacy that is unlike anything they have experienced before. But it is possible, and the life on the other side of that work, the ability to actually be in love without running, the ability to let someone see you and stay anyway, the ability to feel close without feeling suffocated, that is worth working toward. So where does all of this leave us? Let me bring it back to the beginning. Avoidants are loyal to one thing only, their avoidance. Not because they are bad, not because they do not love you, not because you are not worthy of more, but because their nervous system has been running a very old and very powerful protection program for a very long time. And that program has its own loyalty that supersedes everything else until it does not. until the work is done and the patterns are examined and a new way of being becomes possible. Your job is not to compete with that loyalty. Your job is not to fight for a position above their avoidance in the hierarchy of their priorities. Your job is to know yourself, to know what you need, to know what you deserve, to have your own back, to grieve what you need to grieve, to see clearly what is actually in front of you, and to make choices from that clarity rather than from fear or hope or the desperate wish that love alone will be enough to change something that requires a different kind of work entirely. You are not too much. You have never been too much. Your need for closeness and consistency and emotional availability is not a flaw. It is a legitimate human need, and you deserve a relationship where that need is met. Not perfectly, not every single moment, but consistently, genuinely. From someone who is actually available to be there, you deserve the real thing, not the almost, not the crumbs, not the rubber band, not the ceiling, the real thing. And knowing that, truly knowing it in your bones and not just in your head, that is where your next chapter starts.